Narrated by Aisha, the wife of the Prophet peace be upon him. In the lifetime of the Prophet peace be upon him the sun eclipsed and he went to the mosque and the people aligned behind him. He said the takbir, starting the prayer, and prolonged the recitation from the Quran, and then said takbir and performed a prolonged bowing, then he lifted his head and said, Sami Allahu liman hamidah, Allah heard him who sent his praises to him. He then did not prostrate but stood up, and recited a prolonged recitation which was shorter than the first recitation. He again said takbir and then bowed a prolonged bowing but shorter than the first one and then said, Sami'a Allahu liman hamidah Rabbana walak lamd, Allah heard him who sent his praises to him. O our sustainer! All the praises are for you, and then prostrate and did the same in the second rak'ah. Thus he completed 4 bowing and 4 prostrations. The sun, eclipse, had cleared before he finished the prayer. After the prayer, he stood up, glorified and praised Allah as he deserved and then said, the sun and the moon are 2 of the signs of Allah. They do not eclipse because of the death or the life, birth, of someone. When you see them make haste for the prayer. Narrated Az Zuri, I said to Urway, when the sun eclipsed at Medina your brother, Abdullah bin Az Zubair, offered only a 2 rak'at prayer like that of the morning, Fajr, prayer. Urway replied, yes, for he missed the Prophet's tradition, concerning this matter. Narrated by Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, on the day when the sun Kasafat, eclipsed, Allah's Messenger peace be upon him prayed, he stood up and said takbir and recited a prolonged recitation, then he performed a prolonged bowing, then he raised his head and said, Sami'a Allahu liman hamidah, and then remained standing and recited a prolonged recitation which was shorter than the first. Then he performed a prolonged bowing which was shorter than the first. Then he prostrate and prolonged the prostration and he did the same in the second rak'ah as in the first and then finished the prayer with taslim. By that time the sun eclipse had cleared. He addressed the people and said, the sun and the moon are 2 of the signs of Allah, they do not eclipse, yaksifan, because of the death or the life, birth, of someone. So when you see them make haste for the prayer. Narrated by Abu Bakr. Allah's Messenger peace be upon him said, the sun and the moon are 2 signs amongst the signs of Allah and they do not eclipse because of the death of someone but Allah frightens his devotees with them. Narrated by Amra bint Abdurrahman. A Jewess came to ask Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, about something. She said to her, may Allah give you refuge from the punishment of the grave. So Aisha asked Allah's Messenger peace be upon him, would the people be punished in their graves? Allah's Messenger peace be upon him after seeking refuge with Allah from the punishment of the grave, and thus replied in the affirmative. Then one day, Allah's Messenger peace be upon him rode to go to some place but the sun eclipsed. He returned in the forenoon and passed through the rear of the dwellings of his wives and stood for the eclipse prayer, and the people stood behind him. He stood up for a long period and then performed a prolonged bowing which was shorter than the first bowing. Then he raised his head and prostrate. Then he stood up for the second rak'ah for a long while but the standing was shorter than that of the first rak'ah. Then he performed a prolonged bowing which was shorter than the first one. Then he raised his head and prostrate. Then he stood up for a long time but shorter than the first. Then he performed a prolonged bowing but shorter than the first. Then he raised his head and prostrate and finished the prayer, and then delivered the sermon and said as much as Allah wished. And then he ordered the people to seek refuge with Allah from the punishment of the grave.